Greetings and salutations, all my fellow American sovereigns. This is the Vocational Science Freedom Saturday Night Civics and Sovereignty class. And this will be our third reading of The Conspirators' Hierarchy. This is a book which we've been doing for the past couple of episodes. It is a book that is written in 1992. So as we're going through this, just kind of keep that in mind, because there's going to be a lot of people spoken about in this book that probably are no longer in power. They're not controlling things as they would have been doing at this time. But the importance of reading this book is so that we can see what the power structures are that are actually controlling things around the world, in the United States here, and how they go about getting things done, which they wish to get done, which are A, not lawful, and B, against American values, against our country, the continued destruction of the republic, and so on and so forth. And also, obviously, the corruption of the law itself, which is a big part of what the attorney does in regards to our slavery. So we left off at this part right here regarding Mexico. And I'm just going to start right back in. So it's just a continuation from where we left off. And tonight we will get into some interesting things, one of which is who actually controls the ADL, which before I read this, I had no idea. So to start off, Mexico received its nuclear power technology from Argentina, but the Malvinas War put an end to that. And this was in reference to, it was talking about beforehand why Mexico is still, for the most part, a third world nation, why they've never properly industrialized, and why they don't have nuclear power. So that was kind of the precursor to this paragraph here. The Club of Rome decreed back in 1986 that it would stop exports of nuclear technology to developing countries. With nuclear power stations generating abundant cheap electricity, Mexico would have become the Germany of Latin America. Well, by industrial standards possibly, but not by culture, certainly. Such a state of affairs would have been a disaster for the conspirators, who have, by 1991, stopped all exports of nuclear technology except that destined for Israel. What the Committee of 300 has in mind for Mexico is a feudal peasantry. Well, guess what? That's exactly what they have in mind for us as well. It'll just take them longer to get there. A condition that allows for easy management and looting of Mexican oil. A stable and prosperous Mexico can only be a plus for the United States. This is what the conspirators wish to prevent, so they have engaged in decades of innuendo, slander, and direct economic war on Mexico. Before former President López Portillo took office and nationalized the banks, Mexico was losing $200 million a day to capital flight. Organized and orchestrated by the Committee of 300's representatives in banks and mortgage houses on Wall Street. Because remember, these bastards, the Committee of 300, they're the ones that run all of the high-level banks and also control the IMF, the World Bank, the National Monetary Fund. That's them. To continue, if only we in the United States had statesmen and not politicians running the country, we could act together and set back the one world government / New World Order plans to return Mexico to a state of helplessness. If we were able to defeat the Club of Rome's plans for Mexico, it would come as a shock to the Committee of 300, a shock from which they could take a long time to recover. The inheritors of the Illuminati pose as great a threat to the United States as they do to Mexico. By seeking common ground with Mexican patriotic movements, we in the United States could forge a formidable force to be reckoned with. Well, they kind of took care of that too, from the standpoint of the bolstering of the power of the cartels, coupled with the destruction of the legitimacy of the Mexican government, making it just absolutely corrupt without question. And seeing as how we're talking about this in the year 2025, this latest Mexican election, if you want to call it an election, it really wasn't. It was the most bloody election in Mexico's history. Okay. I think there was something like upwards of 25, maybe more candidates that were murdered so that this puppet female Luciferian filth could take the presidency of Mexico and continue with her master's plans. And we have to deal with, in America, these electronic voting machines. But at least in America, at least not yet, you don't see all the candidates just getting whacked left and right, which is exactly what happened in this latest Mexican, again, quote unquote, election. But to continue. But such action requires leadership, and we are more lacking in leadership than in any other area of endeavor. The Committee of 300, through its many affiliated organizations, was able to nullify the Reagan presidency. Here is what Stuart Butler of the Heritage Foundation had to say on the subject. Quote, "The right thought had it won in 1980, but in fact it have lost." What Butler was referring to was the situation in which the right found itself when it realized that every single position of importance in the Reagan administration was filled by Fabianists, appointees recommended by the Heritage Foundation. Butler went on to say that Heritage would use right-wing ideas to impose left-wing radical principles upon the United States. I'm going to read that again because this is an extremely important point. The Fabian Society, the Committee of 300, the Cult of Rome, they make it look like it's right-wing ideas, but they're actually left-wing radical principles imposed upon the United States. Okay, the same radical ideas which Sir Peter Vickers Hall, top Fabianist in the U.S. and the number one man at Heritage, had been openly discussing during the election year. Sir Peter Vickers Hall remained an active Fabianist even though he was running a conservative, quote-unquote, think tank. As a member of the British oligarchical Vickers armament manufacturing family, he had a position of power. The Vickers family supplied both sides of the First World War and again during Hitler's rise to power. Vickers' official cover was the University of California's Urban and Regional Development Institute. He was a longtime confidant of British Labour leader and Committee of 300 member Anthony Wedgwood Benn. Both Vickers and Benn are integrated with the Tavistock Institute for Human Relations, the premier brainwashing institution in the world. You guys want to really get deep into the control mechanisms of psychology. That's the Tavistock Institute. And its purpose is to brainwash the leaders of the world. Okay, yes, the technologies and things that they do tend to trickle down to us, in our brainwashing, but it's mainly focused for what they want to control, which is the world's leaders. Oh, Flood said 37 to 39 dead candidates. Okay, I was way off. Yeah, for Mexico's quote-unquote election. So consider the following example. Quote, "There are two Americas." Okay, but let me back up here. So Vickers uses his Tavistock training to very good effect when speech making. Consider the following example. Quote, "There are two Americas. One is the 19th century heavy industry-based society. The other is the growing post-industrial society, in some cases built on the shards of the old America. It is the crisis between these two worlds which will produce the economic and social catastrophe of the next decade." Well, they're a little bit behind on that, but it'll probably be this decade. "The two worlds are in fundamental opposition. They cannot coexist. In the end, the post-industrial world must crush and obliterate the other one." Remember, his speech was made in 1981, and we can see from the state of our economy and our industries just how accurate was Sir Peter's prediction. When concerned people ask me how long the 1991 recession will last, I offer them to Sir Peter's statements and add my own opinion that it will not end until 1995-96. I can't remember how long it did actually run, but anyway, the point he's making is that it was all planned, predicted, and controlled, right? So, which has been every single recession, depression, boom bust cycle since the filthy Federal Reserve System came into existence in 1913. Okay. And then they cranked up the chains of slavery, if you will, in 1933. But to continue. Okay, so that America has already been destroyed, meaning the industrial America that we used to know. I reported Sir Peter's speech in my newsletter soon after it was delivered, how prolific it was, but then it was easy to predict a future already written for America by the Committee of 300 and its Executive Club of Rome. What was Sir Peter saying in a euphemistic manner? Translated into ordinary, everyday English, he was saying that the old American way of life, our true and trusted Republican form of government based upon our Constitution, was going to be crushed by the New World Order. America, as we knew it, was going to have to go or be crushed into pieces. I recall a quote from Benjamin Netanyahu talking about that they like to destroy countries that they hate slowly, and that will be their goal, is to make America the biggest welfare state in the world. That's their plans, and they're doing a pretty good job at it. To continue. Sir Peter was no exception. To make it clearly understood where he was coming from, Sir Peter rounded off his speech by declaring, quote, I am perfectly happy working with the Heritage Foundation and groups like that. True Fabians look to the new right to push through some of their more radical ideas. For more than a decade, the British population has been subject to a constant propaganda barrage of how it was on the industrial skids. All of this is true, but the net effect of the propaganda was to demoralize the population, exactly as intended by the new scientists at Tavistock. Quote, this will happen when the United States has an economy worsens. This demoralizing process is necessary to make people accept difficult choices. If there is no planning for the future, or if constituencies block progress, there will be social chaos on a scale which is currently hard to imagine. The outlook of urban America is bleak. There is a possibility of doing something with the inner cities, but basically the cities will shrink and the manufacturing base will decline. This will produce social convulsions. Was Sir Peter a psychic, a magician of great report, or merely a charlatan fortune teller with a great deal of luck? The answer is none of these. All Sir Peter was doing was reading off the blueprint of the Committee of 300 Club of Rome for slow death of the United States as a former industrial giant. Looking back over 10 years of Sir Peter's predictions, can anybody doubt that the Committee of 300's plans for the demise of the industrialized United States has become fiat accomplished? I'd say so. Haven't Sir Peter's predictions proved to be remarkably accurate? Indeed they have, almost down to the last word. It is worth noting that Sir Peter Vickers Hall's father-in-law, worked on the Stanford research paper, quote, Changing Images of Man, from which much of the 3,000 pages of material advice sent to the Reagan administration was taken. So, these filthy Luciferian scumbags just send 3,000 pages of material to the Reagan administration, and it just gets done, right? No different than any other presidency of doing what they wanted to do, for the exception of probably Kennedy, because he wasn't going along with a lot of what they wanted to do, and they were like, okay, we'll just get rid of you. So, to continue. Moreover, as a senior MI6 British intelligence officer, Sir Peter Vickers was in a position to give Heritage a great deal of advance information. As a member of the Committee of 300 and NATO, Sir Peter Vickers was around when NATO directed the Club of Rome to develop a social program which would utterly change the direction in which America wanted to go. The Club of Rome, under Tavistock direction, ordered Stanford Research Institute, SRI, to develop such a program, not only for America, but for every nation in the Atlantic Alliance and the OPEC nations. It was Sir Peter's protege, Stuart Butler, who gave President Reagan 3,000 pages of recommendations, which no doubt contained some opinions expressed by Anthony Wedgwood Benn, a member of Parliament and a ranking member of the Committee of 300. Benn told members of the Socialist International, who met at Washington on December 8th, 1980, quote, you can thrive under Volcker's credit collapse if you profile Reagan to intensify the credit collapse. And he's talking about the savings and loan crisis that happened back then. That Butler's advice was taken and applied to the Reagan administration can be seen in the collapse of the savings and loan and banking industries, which accelerated under Reagan economic policies. A bit of what I just said. Now, to clarify what happened there. So the whole idea of like Reaganomics, or what was called trickle-down economics, was that the Fed was going to crank up interest rates, right? So that somehow or another, the rich people would be making more money on interest, and then somehow that would trickle down to, the lower classes. Well, of course, that was ridiculous. That never happened. And it was just another huge power grab to make sure that the rest of the industrialized nation would have no ability to re-equip itself, to re-engineer, to retool, to rebuild, none of it, right? Because interest rates were so high, you couldn't take out loans to actually get businesses going. So it crushed off the rest of the middle manufacturing, if you will, in America. And that was exactly their plan. Okay. So, and then it also perpetuated into the whole idiocy of the savings and loan collapse and bailout and blah, 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 which was just their precursor to bailing out all of the banks at a much later date. But to continue, while Ben called it profiling, he really meant that Reagan should be brainwashed. Again, Tavistock Institute. It's worth noting that von Hayek, who was a member of the Heritage, used his student Milton Friedman, sure you guys know who he is, to preside over the Club of Rome's plans to deindustrialize America, using the Reagan presidency to accelerate the collapse of first the steel industry and then the auto and housing industries. For example, in this regard, a French black nobility member, Etnie d'Avington, as a member of the Committee of 300, was assigned to the task of collapsing the steel industry in this country. It is doubtful that any of the hundreds of thousands of steel workers and shipyard workers who have been without jobs for the past decade have ever heard of d'Avington. I don't know how to pronounce that. Anyway, French name. I fully reported the d'Avington plan in April 1981 Economic Review, entering that fateful December 10th Club of Rome meeting in Washington, D.C. was a mystery man from Iran who turned out to be Bnei Seder, the Ayatollah Khomeini's special envoy. Oh, really? Are you kidding me? One speech in particular at the December 10th, 1980 conclave caught my attention, mainly because it came from Francis Mitterrand, a man the French establishment had discarded and thought to be washed up, but my intelligence source had previously told me that Mitterrand was in the process of being picked up, dusted off, and returned to power. So what he said carried a good deal of weight for me. Quote, industrial capitalist development is the opposite of freedom. We must put an end to it. The economic systems of the 20th and 21st centuries will use machines to crush man. First in the domain of nuclear energy, which is already producing formidable results. I don't know what he means by that, but okay. Mitterrand's return to the Elysee Palace was a great triumph for socialism. It proved that the Committee of 300 was powerful enough to predict happenings and then to make them happen. By force, or by whatever means it took to make its point that it could crush any and all opposition, even if, as in the case of Mitterrand, he had been totally rejected a few short days before a discerning political power group in Paris. Another group representative in the December 1980 Washington meetings was with observer status was John Graham, also known as Erwin Schroll, head of the fact-finding committee of the Anti Defamation League. So Erwin Schroll, ADL. The ADL, now get this, everybody. The ADL is an outright British intelligence operation run by all three branches of British intelligence. That is MI6 and the JIO. Saul's extensive bag of dirty tricks was garnered from the sewers of the East End of London. So, is it any wonder why the ADL always goes after anybody on the right who is actually sick and tired of this socialist, communistic bullshit control? No surprise at all, because that's who's running them. That's where they're getting their marching orders from. So when I read that, I was like, holy shit, this makes a lot more sense now. So I want everybody to keep that in mind and tell all your friends that that's who runs the ADL from now on, okay? Sewell is still a member of the super secret SIS, an elite James Bond type of operation. Yet nobody underestimates the power of the ADL, nor its long reach. Sewell works closely with Hall and other Fabiists. He was singled out as useful to British intelligence while at Rusker Labour College at Oxford University in England, the same communist education center that gave us Milner, Rhodes, Burgess, McLean, and Kim Philby. You gotta be shitting me. Well, I suppose makes sense. Yeah. Anyway, if anybody doesn't know, I don't want to get into who all these men are, but at least Milner and Rhodes. Okay, so Milner's Roundtable was like one of the first think tank groups, if you will, and then Cecil Rhodes, that guy, he was the one that ran all of the South African diamond mines, and when he died, in his last will and testament of Cecil Rhodes, he gave all of his money back to the Rothschilds, because the Rothschilds are the ones that gave him loans to set up the damn things to begin with. He gave everything back to them, and then with one purpose, which was to create the committees in ways which would reconnect and have the British oligarchy take back over America. Literally the reconquering of America by the English crown and the English oligarchy. And part of that takeover was the Rhodes Scholarship. Okay. So everybody who has a Rhodes Scholarship, I don't know, like Bill Clinton, like fucking Rachel Maddow, right? Everybody that has a Rhodes Scholarship has one goal. It is to return us back under British control. That's it. Okay? So anyway, I don't want to get into all the rest of this stuff, but I thought it was extremely important because I was like, oh my God, they're all connected. Something I didn't know until I just read that. Okay, to continue. Oxford and Cambridge universities have long been the providence of sons and daughters of the elite, when those parents belonged to the quote-unquote upper crust of the British high society. While at Oxford, Sewell joined the Young People's Socialist League and was recruited by British intelligence shortly after. Sewell was posted to the United States, where he came under the protection and sponsorship of one of the most insidious leftists in the country, Walter Lippmann. Yeah. Lippmann founded and ran the League for Industrial Democracy and Students for Democratic Society. Both leftist spoiler operations to set industrial workers at variance with what it called, quote, the capitalist class and management. This, what I just read, okay, Lippmann founding the League of Industrial Democracy and the Students for Democratic Society, that they should work at variance against what they call the capitalist class. All of these moronic people, students, brainwashed students coming out of all of these colleges, all go along with this stupid ideology. Probably a good reason why they had to get rid of Kirk, if indeed he did get killed and shot. I mean, I'm still up in debate about that, whatever. Because he was changing and altering the minds of the people that have been brainwashed for such a long period of time. And this is the guy, and this is their goal. Right? Oh, capitalism's bad. Oh, get rid of capitalism. Left-wing socialists everywhere. Right. So anyway, to continue. Both of Lippmann's projects were an integral part of the Committee of 300 apparatus that stretched right across America, of which Lippmann was a most important member. Sewell had strong connections with the Justice Department and can secure FBI profiles of any person he targets. Yeah. The Justice Department has orders to give Sewell everything he wants when he wants it. Most of Sewell's activities center around, quote, keeping an eye on right-wing groups and individuals. The ADL has an open door to the State Department and makes good use of state's impressive intelligence agency. Okay, so let's bring this full circle here. You have British intelligence controlling the ADL. The ADL gets to walk into the State Department's intelligence and pull up whatever they want to, and along with the FBI, which is why you always see the FBI and the ADL always walking in lockstep to go after whoever they don't want or don't like regarding anti-communists. Pretty clear. Like, I don't know how much more in your face that can be. And as a side note, in case anybody doesn't know, the FBI has no charter to operate within the United States, okay? And I'm just going to bring this up for a second so everybody can, you might not be able to read it because it's going to be very fuzzy, but I want to read this. This is from, it was actually entered into the Library of Congress, but this is a letter, basically a a FOIA request, if you will, from this person called Mr. Robinson. I don't know who this guy is, but it's the body of the information in the letter that's important. So basically, this guy demanded to have produced the charter for the FBI. Okay. And so this is what he got back. So it says, Dear Mr. Robinson, this is in response to your request for a copy of the charter of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Our research shows that while most entities within the federal government are officially established and defined by charter, the FBI is not. The Attorney General created the FBI in 1908, the United States Government Manual 347-8, 1984. The Bureau's activities have since been outlined by various statutory authority. The date you mentioned in your letter identifies a proposal made in Congress that a formal charter be adopted. The charter, however, was not adopted. We are enclosing a machine-produced bibliography of material pertaining to that proposal. You may obtain further information to assist you in your research by writing to the Office of the Director, Federal Bureau of Investigation, J. Edgar Hoover Building, so on and so forth. If we can be of further assistance, please let us know. Right? The FBI doesn't have a fucking charter, people. It has no lawful authority. Period. Full stop. Okay? Good. Just want everybody to know that. Because, oh, by the way, the meme that's now up in the corner, because I just saw it flash, that's the flag of the Fabian Society. Take a close look at that thing. That is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Okay? That's their flag. Now, I think they've changed it recently because too many people like me have brought it up and said, hey, wait a second, you might want to look at these guys, see what they're up to. And by the way, take a look at their flag, right? And it makes perfect sense because of what they were talking about early in this book, just a minute ago, about that they create right-wing organizations to perpetuate left-wing outcomes. That's perfect. A wolf in sheep's clothing. That's exactly what they're doing. They make it look like they're doing one thing when they're really doing something else. Okay? All right. So to continue here, the State Department has a layer of agents in the right wing, posing as, quote, fearless anti-Semitic fighters. There are 4 leaders in this group of informers, 3 of whom are discreet Jewish homosexuals. This spy group has been in operation for the past 2 decades. They publish virulently anti-Jewish, quote-unquote, newspapers. So, all right. So the ADL has agents that create things that are, quote-unquote, anti-Jewish. Right? Again, just think about the wolf in sheep's clothing. And sell a wide variety of anti-Semitic books. One of the principal operators that works out of Louisiana. A member of this group is a writer who is dearly beloved to Christian right-wing circles. The group and the individual who go to make it up are under the protection of the ADL. Right. Sewall was deeply involved in ABSCAM and is often called upon the law enforcement agencies to assist them in investigations and sting operations. Right. Sewall was assigned to, quote-unquote, dog Reagan in terms of the course laid out for the newly elected president by the Heritage Foundation, and to figuratively fire a few warning shots if Reagan looked like deviating or taking off his blinders at any time. Sewall helped get rid of any troublesome right-wing advisor not beholden to Heritage for his or her job with the Reagan administration. Such a person was Ray Donovan, Reagan's Secretary of Labor, who was eventually removed from his post thanks to dirty tricks department of the ADL. James Baker III, one of those on the list of the 3,000 recommendations made by the Heritage Foundation, was the go-between who carried Sewall's message of hate about Donovan to the president. Another important conspirator was Philip Agee, the so-called CIA defector. Although not a member of the committee, he was nevertheless its case officer from Mexico, and run by the Royal Institute of International Affairs, the RIIA, and Council on Foreign Relations. For the record, and this is extremely important, Nothing that happens in the U.S. happens without the sanction of the Royal Institute of International Affairs. It is a continuing and ongoing agreement, first openly entered into, where there were many such secret agreements before that, by Churchill and Roosevelt in 1938, under the terms of which U.S. intelligence services are obliged to share intelligence secrets with British intelligence. Right. Okay. So, again, this is the total takeover of American sovereignty by the filthy British Luciferian Jews. Got it? Good. Yeah, Spectre, exactly. Spectre said, so the FBI is an illegal entity masquerading as law enforcement, a.k.a. Chatham House. Yes, that's precisely what it is. So this special basis, meaning this thing between Churchill and Roosevelt, this is the basis of the so-called special relationship between the two countries about which Churchill and Lord Halifax boasted, and which, quote, special relationships, close quote, was responsible for the U.S. fighting the Gulf War against Iraq and on behalf of British interests, more especially British Petroleum, one of the most important companies in the Committee of 300, in which Queen Elizabeth's immediate family has a big stake. Well, just basically the crown has a big stake. No intelligence activity has taken place since 1938, except through this special joint command structure. Philip Agee joined the CIA after graduating from Notre Dame, where he was introduced into its Jesuit Freemason ring. So, right, because Notre Dame is clearly controlled by the Jesuits. Agee first came to my attention in 1968 as an intelligence officer behind the riots at University of Mexico. One of the most important things about the Mexican student riots was that they occurred at the same time as the student rioting in New York, Bonn, Prague, and West Berlin. With the coordination, expertise, and its special intelligence network, of which Interpol is an integral part. By the way, just remember, Interpol, and we spoke about this, I think, last episode. Interpol is run by the Rockefellers. Okay? So just remember that. It is not difficult, as it might seem at first sight, for the committee to set in motion carefully timed global actions, whether they be student rioting or deposing leaders of supposedly sovereign nations. It is all in a day's work for the quote-unquote Olympians. From Mexico, Agee moved on to align himself with the Puerto Rican terrorist groups. During this time, he became a trusted confidant of the Cuban dictator, Fidel Castro. It should not be imagined that while Agee was carrying out these operations, he was doing so as a quote-unquote rogue agent. On the contrary, he was also working for the CIA all during these assignments. Trouble came when Castro's Cuban intelligence service was able to quote-unquote turn him. Agee continued to work in his capacity as a member of the CIA until his double role was uncovered. This involved the biggest Soviet listening post in West, located at Lourdes, Cuba, staffed by 3,000 Soviet specialists in signals monitoring and deciphering. Lourdes has the capability of monitoring thousands of electronic signals simultaneously. Many a private phone conversation between a member of Congress and his mistress was picked up at Lourdes and used to telling effect. Yeah, right. Also, in case anybody else doesn't know, let's connect in here the other little islands that happen to be down there, aside from Cuba, right? Like, I don't know why there's a Mossad agent that owns an island down there and, who didn't kill himself. And right next to that island, there's an island that's owned by the Biden family, and there's an island that's owned by Richard Brand, the guy that owns Virgin Airline. I think his name's Brand. Anyway, so surprise, surprise, that they're all right next to each other. Well, what? Don't tell me that they don't have things set up down there that still monitor communications. Of course they do, right? Richard Branson, thank you, Spectre. Spectre said, by the way, do you know that Utah Valley University is known for churning out students for intelligentsia? There's another one. Okay. So it appears that Notre Dame and that one, and obviously Oxford, they all do. When they find someone who they can control, that's probably part of their group anyway, or comes from some bloodline that's, remotely connected. What they'll do is they'll say, okay, we got you, kid. And then they'll put them into all the CIA programs. Maybe they'll run them through, Monarch program. They'll brainwash them. get them on the program so that they'll then continue to do the will and the bidding of the Luciferian globalists, right? That's what they're doing. And you see it all the time. So anyway, to continue. Although we are told today in 1991 that quote unquote communism is dead, the United States has done nothing to close down the vast spy operations which sit on our doorstep. Incidentally, Lords has the capacity of picking up even the weakest Tempest signal, which is the type given off by a fax machine or an electronic typewriter, which, when deciphered, will give the contents of whatever is being typed or faxed. Yeah. I'm sure they don't really even have to do that anymore. Obviously, we're way beyond that point. So now there's just, I'm sure, backdoors and everything. And I know that there's backdoors in every single computer that has an Intel chip in it, because that's what the Israelis do over there, which is why I have a computer that does not have an Intel chip in it. I only go AMD for that exact reason. Now, are all the programs and other things that may or may not be on any of our computers, and particularly smartphones, which is why I don't have one, listening to us all the time anyway? Sure. That's why I like to keep all actual private conversations and things that I don't want to be sent out to wherever, keep that on Mega, right? So Mega is one of the only fully encrypted message platforms, which is also very good at sharing documents and sharing videos, like Flood does with his readings, like I do with all of the show notes regarding any class of the VSOF. If you want to download the rest of the information that goes with the class, it will always be on Mega, because Kim.com is no lover of the Luciferian occultists. And even when they dragged him before Congress and said, give us the back doors, we need to know what all of those people are doing on your platform, he's like, I don't have them. Go fuck yourself. Which he doesn't. Because if you lose your codes to Mega, you never get them back, because they are not held by Mega, which is another reason why I like it. So basically, Congress can't get into it. This apparatus, this huge world interlaced Luciferian fuckery, cannot get into Mega, okay? So I highly suggest that you use it. And if you want to join the VSOF, we have our Mega rooms where we talk in private about all kinds of other matters on a regular basis all throughout the day and share things with each other. And if you'd like to do that, all you got to do is go to vocationalsciencefreedom.org and download the welcome package. Back to this. Lords remains a dagger in the heart of the United States. There's absolutely no reason for its continued existence. If the U.S. and USSR are truly at peace with each other, why the continued need for so massive a spy operation? The simple truth is that, rather than entrenching personnel as we are led to believe, the KGB has taken on additional recruits during 1990 and 91. Bernard Levine is probably not a name that is well known in the United States. Unlike dissidents, pop stars, or Hollywood's latest miserable discovery, academics seldom, if ever, come before the public eye. Of the hundreds of the academics in the United States working under the control of the Club of Rome, Levine is worthy of special mention, for no other reason than his role in undermining Iran, the Philippines, South Africa, Nicaragua, and South Korea. That's quite the list. The demise of the Shah of Iran was run to a plan devised by Bernard Levine and Richard Falk, and supervised by Albert Anderson's Aspen Institute. That's most interesting. Because the first person that they ousted out of Iran was Mohammad Mossadegh, and he was a democratically elected leader, and he said that Iran should give oil money that it gets back to its people to improve its populace. Well, obviously the global Luciferians weren't having any of that, particularly not British Petroleum. So what they did was Kermit Roosevelt, who was the grandson of Teddy Roosevelt, went in there with a few $1 million and basically ousted Mohammad Mossadegh. And then the CIA put in the Shah of Iran. So now it's saying that they took him out as well. So I don't know what happened in there. I thought the Shah was pretty good for them, but apparently he pissed them off in some way, shape, or form. But anyway, to continue. Levine was the author of the work titled Time, Perspective, and Morale, which is a Club of Rome publication concerning how to break down the morale of nations and individual leaders. Again, Tavistock. Here's an extract of the document. Quote, one of the main techniques for breaking down morale through a strategy of terror consists in exactly this tactic. Keep the person hazy as to where he stands and just what he may expect. In addition, if frequent vacillations between severe disciplinary measures and promise of good treatment, that's the rod and the carrot, together with the spreading of contradictory news, make the structure of the situation unclear, then the individual may cease to know whether a particular plan would lead toward or away from his goal. Under these conditions, even those individuals who have definite goals and are ready to take risks are paralyzed by the severe interconflict in regard to what to do. Close quote. This Club of Rome blueprint applies to countries as well as to individuals, particularly the government leaders of those countries. We in the U.S. need not think that, quote, oh, well, this is America, and those kind of things just don't happen here, close quote. Let me assure you that they are happening in the United States, and perhaps more so than any other country. The Levine Club of Rome plan is designed to demoralize us all, so that in the end we feel we should follow whatever it is that is planned for us. And in this day and age, this is now coming to digital IDs, central bank digital currencies, the continuation of definitely the demoralization, that's without question, and the continued destruction of our industry and the continued destruction of our infrastructure and the flooding of our nation with third world shit stains who want nothing more than just to destroy us, who are nothing more literally than a military aged army of these people come here to finish off the destruction of America. That's what they are. Now, there's been a lot of deportations lately. Good thing. Fine. But if there's 30 million of these scumbags here and 1 or 2 million of them get deported, that's not a job done. And I'm not falling for it. Okay? So anyway, to continue. Any seemingly strong leader who suddenly appears to quote-unquote rescue the nation must be regarded with the utmost suspicion. Yeah. Remember that Khomeini was groomed for years by British intelligence, especially during his time in Paris before he suddenly appeared as the savior of Iran. Boris Yeltsin is from the same MI6 SIS stable. And by the way, not to put too fine a point on it, so is Netanyahu. The Club of Rome feels confident that it has carried out its Committee of 300 mandate to quote-unquote soften up the United States. After 45 years of waging war on the people of this nation, who will doubt that it has indeed accomplished its task? Look around and see how we have been demoralized. Drugs, pornography, rock and roll music, free sex, family unit all but totally undermined. Lesbianism, homosexuality, LGBTQ, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and finally, the ghastly murder of millions of innocent babies by their own mothers. Has there ever been a crime so vile as the mass abortion of America? Well, that could be argued, but yeah, there's no reason to downplay any of it. All of it's murder, all of it's evil, and those that are perpetuating it need to be eradicated. But to continue. With the U.S. spirituality morally bankrupted, with our industrial base destroyed, throwing over 30 million people out of work, with our big cities ghastly cesspools of every imaginable crime, with a murder rate almost 3 times higher than any other country. Well, that's all because of gun control, but anyway, I don't get into that. With 4 million homeless, which I'm sure is a lot higher now, the corruption in government reaching economic proportions, who would gainsay that the United States is ready for collapse from within? Into the waiting arms of the new dark age one world government. Right. I would say we are pretty much there and continuing. The Club of Rome has succeeded in splitting the Christian churches. It has succeeded in building up an army of charismatics, fundamentalists, and evangelicals who will fight for the Zionist state of Israel. During the Gulf War of genocide, I received scores of letters asking me how I could oppose, quote, a just Christian war against Iraq, close quote. How could I doubt that Christian fundamentalist support for the Committee of 300's war against Iraq was not biblical, After all, didn't Billy Graham pray with President Bush just before the shooting started? Yeah. Doesn't the Bible speak of wars and rumors of wars? These letters give an insight into just how well the Tavistock Institute has done its work. The Christian fundamentalists will be a formidable force behind the state of Israel, exactly as planned. This you can see endlessly in all of the quote-unquote influencers, Christian influencers that are behind and helping Israel. They're our greatest ally. Uh-huh. And yet they backdoor and spy on us endlessly. I don't know. Spectre, you got any number on the amount of congressmen that are controlled by AIPAC? That's probably something you could pull off the top of your head. I don't know, but I think it's something ridiculous. 7/8 of them, maybe. I don't know. It's really bad. All but about 3. Okay, so 515. Thank you. I knew you'd know that. So yeah, okay. So Israel totally controls everything as far as American policy is concerned, right? All right. So that tells you right there of this 3-dimensional picture of what we've been talking about and what I've been reading tonight. Okay, we know who they are. We know what their organizations are called. Their organizations, presumably, have offices. So when the time comes to maybe, I don't know, cleanse America again and have another revolutionary war to get rid of these British again, it's not going to be too hard to find them. Right? And yes, this might sound like Fed posting, but my point is that if all these people are treasonous, all these people have said without question that they are at war with us, that they want us dead, and that they see us as cattle, okay, then fine. War is war, right? That's what it is. So if you're telling me that you're coming to war against me, all right, fine, then it's war. I'd rather have it out in the open, honestly. I don't know what anybody's waiting for because they keep doing it and they're not going to stop until we actually do stop them. So, yeah, Spectre, exactly. Delegation of 250 U.S. state legislators head to Israel next week. Right. And isn't it interesting that that's happening right around the same time that the War Department Hegseth is bringing every single frickin' general to have a little confab? Okay, those two things put together, that they're happening right at the same time, that to me is frightening as hell. I don't know what they're up to, but if they want to try and go full on, I don't know, let's cleanse America, whatever, of like any of our opposition, all right, well then the war, quote unquote, like hot war, is probably going to start next week or next month, or maybe this winter. Maybe that'll be their thing. I don't know, but the point is you have to be prepared. You have to understand what these people do. You have to understand who they are, how they think, and certainly how they think about you. Because you're cattle to them. You have no hesitation. They don't care, right? So prepare. Prepare properly. Get your local militia together. Men you can trust, right? Have a plan. Have a bug out plan if you need to. If you're in the city, get the fuck out. Have a place where you can go, where you can have food, where you can take care of yourselves, where you can protect yourselves, where you can have, defenses, right? And do what you need to do. And if you haven't done it by this point, you don't have much time left, honestly. I think it's always better to, well, as the old saying goes, it's always better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. So get your skills, get your stuff together, and know what you're doing, okay? All right, I'll finish this up here. All right, so how sad that these fine people do not realize that they have been grossly misused by the Club of Rome and that their opinions and beliefs are not their own. Well, right. When you have preachers preaching to them, this is what the gospel says, and we must protect Israel. Well, that's what you're going to get. And because remember, the Tavistock Institute is the one that's creating and perpetuating the evangelical movement. So just remember that. Those of them were created by the hundreds of committees of 300 think tanks that dot the American landscape. In other words, like any other segment of the United States population, the Christian fundamentalists and evangelicals have been thoroughly brainwashed. Period. Full stop. We as a nation are ready to accept the demise of the United States of America and the American way of life once the envy of the entire world. Do not think this has happened on its own. The old, quote, times are changing, quote, syndrome. Time does not change anything. People do. It is a mistake to think that the Committee of 300 and the Club of Rome as European institutions. The Club of Rome exercises great influence and power in the United States and has its own chapter based in Washington, D.C. Senator Claiborne Pell is its leader. Well, somebody else now, probably. And one of its members, Frank M. Potter, a one-time staff director of House Subcommittee on Energy. It is not difficult to see how the Club of Rome has maintained its grip on U.S. energy policies and where environmentalists, right, because that's where this comes from, the Club of Rome perpetuates the environmentalists to deny any aspect of energy that would free us as Americans and be able to reindustrialize again. That's them, right? Just different wolf and different sheep's clothing, but same bastards, right? So this is where the oppression of nuclear energy is coming from, right? Ibid. Perhaps the club's greatest success story is its holdover Congress in regard to nuclear energy, which has had the effect of preventing the U.S. from entering the 21st century as a strong industrial nation. The effect of the anti-nuclear policy of the Club of Rome can be measured in terms of silent blast furnaces, derelict railroad yards, rusting steel mills, shipyards long since closed down, and a valuable, trained workforce scattered across the United States, which may never again be assembled. And technically, it never was. And now that it's been 20 years past this, now going on 30, it's going to be really difficult. Other Club of Rome members in the U.S. are Walter A. Hahn of the Congressional Research Service, Ann Chetham and Douglas Ross, both senior economists. Ross's task, in his own words, was to, quote, translate the Club of Rome's perspectives into legislation to help the country get away from the illusion of plenty, close quote. Right, they want to create scarcity so everybody fights each other and that people die. That's called getting rid of the useless eaters, people. Ann Chetham was the director of an organization called Congressional Clearing House for the Future. Clearinghouse, yeah, that's what they're going to do. They're going to clear your house if you don't stand up. Her task was to profile members of Congress who would be susceptible to astrology and New Age mumbo-jumbo. At one stage, she had in excess of 100 congressmen in her classes. Daily sessions were held in which a variety of astrological forecasts were made based on her occult perceptions. Right. Madame Blavatsky, anyone? Inspector says, and the government that's now taking state in private companies, U.S. Steel, Intel, PM Materials is part of the public-private partnership. Right. Yeah, exactly. Davos fuckery. What they're doing, so their current goal right now, what they're doing is they're doing the private-public partnership so that there's no separation between government and corporations, right? It's just one big mix of whatever. And you can't tell which is which because these Luciferian globalists are already in full control of everything they want. Now they want to be in full control of everything else regarding everything of the government, all governments, so that they can force the entire planet into the one world government. That's what they have to get done in order for them to ultimately accomplish their goals. And one of the major roadblocks for them, I would literally call it 2-ton iron curtain, is all of the arms that we, the American populace, own. That's a huge problem for them. We, the American populace, own more weapons than 3 times of all of the rest of the world's military and police forces combined. That's not something that they can overlook. And aside from idiot musings of retard left-wing morons that are in the military that say, oh, well, when the military comes out, you better do what you're told. No, if they try and use brainwashed military against the American populace, not only is that an absolute violation of law under posse comitatus, there's no way they would ever be able to do anything to us because, as the Japanese general, and I forget his name, rightfully said, you cannot win a war against an army of snipers. It is impossible. It will never happen. They'll never get it done because they'll just take you out from 300 yards. You'll never even see them. Plus, if there's 20 of them, They can take out everybody in your entire squad, or probably a whole bloody platoon. You'll never see them, particularly if you're trying to fight in their neck of the woods, literally, pun intended. Not going to happen, right? So anyway, to continue. Besides Congressman, other prominent people who attended her sessions were Michael Walsh, Thornton Bradshaw, a leading member of the Committee of 300, and David Sternlight, a senior vice president of Allstate Insurance Company. Some of the more important members of the Committee of 300 are also members of NATO, a fact which we ought to remember. These Committee of 300 members often hold several offices. Among the NATO Club of Rome membership are found Hartland Cleveland, a former U.S. ambassador to NATO, Joseph Slater, a director of the Aspen Institute, Donald Leash, a former staffer of the United States Security Agency, George McKee, and Claiborne Pell, to name a few examples. It is important that we remember these names. Make a list of them if you wish. Well, okay, this is what I would say, and it kind of goes back to what I was talking about before. It's important, more important, I would say, to make a list of the offices of the Club of Rome, the Committee of 300, any place where these people meet, any place where they're doing business, right? It's not so much the individual names, it's where. It's the what, not the who. That's the most important here. Because if you only focus on the who, they'll just switch out the who any old bloody time they want to. But the what is still going to be what matters, okay? So, anyway, to continue. As to recall what they are and what they stand for when their names come up in television programs and news services. Following intelligence modus vivendi, leaders of the committee often appear on television, usually in the most innocent of guises. We ought to be aware that nothing they do is innocent. The Committee of 300 has planned its agents in the muscle and sinew of the United States, in its government, in Congress, in advisory posts around the president, as ambassadors, and as secretaries of state. From time to time, the Club of Rome holds gatherings and conferences which, although they appear under innocuous titles, break up into action committees, each of which is assigned a specific task and a specific target date, by which time their assignments must be completed. So here you go, little boys and girls, go off and do your homework. Go destroy this part of America, right? And then come back and tell us how you did it. Right? If it does nothing else, the Committee of 300 was working to a very specific timetable. The first Club of Rome conference in the United States was called by the Committee of 300 in 1969 under the title, quote, The Association of the Club of Rome, close quote. The next meeting was held in 1970 under the title, quote, Rivendell Center of Religious Research, close quote. Right. And was directed by Thomas Burney. Then followed Woodlands Conference held in Houston, Texas, starting in 1971. Thereafter, regular conferences have been held at Woodlands every year. Okay, well, if they're still being held there, again, that's the where, right, and the what. Although in 1971, a later date, the Mitchell Energy and Development Corporation held its energy strategy meeting for the Club of Rome. The recruiting theme, Limit the Growth of the USA, that's telling. Then, to crown it all, the first global conference on the future was held in July of 1980, attended by 4,000 social engineers and members of think tanks. Wow. Yeah, I'm not going to Fed post, but you know where my brain was going. All of those were members of the affiliated with various institutions operating under the Club of Rome umbrella organizations. The first global conference in the future had the blessing of the White House, which held its own conference based on the transcripts of the first global conference forum. It was called, quote, the White House Commission on the 1980s, close quote, and officially recommended the policies of the Club of Rome, quote, as a guide to future U.S. policies, and even went so far as to say that the United States economy is moving out of the industrial phase. This echoed the theme of Sir Peter Vickers Hall and Zbigniew Brzezinski's, and provides further proof that the control exercised by the Committee of 300 over U.S. affairs, both domestic and foreign. As I said in 1981, we are set up politically, socially, and economically so that we remain locked into the Club of Rome's plans. Everything is rigged against us. If we are to survive, then we must break the stranglehold the Committee of 300 has on our government. In every election since Calvin Coolidge ran for the White House, the Committee of 300 has been able to plant its agents in key positions in government so that it matters not who gets in the White House. Right. That's going back a ways, Calvin Coolidge. For example, every one of the candidates who ran for the presidency from the time of Franklin D. Roosevelt was selected, some like to call it handpicked, by the Council on Foreign Relations, acting on the instructions of the Royal Institute of International Affairs, the British counterpart, and the ones who really control things. Especially in the 1980 election, every candidate for the highest office in the United States was run by the CFR. Therefore, it was of no consequence to the conspirators who won the presidential race through such Trojan horses as the Heritage Foundation and the CFR. All key policy-making positions in the new administrations were filled by the Council on Foreign Relations nominees. And before that, since the 1960s, by NATO Club of Rome yes men, thereby ensuring that key policy decisions bore the indelible stamp of the Club of Rome and the CFR, acting as the executive arms of the Committee of 300. Okay. My voice is about had it, and we're about up to an hour, so I'll make a note here. Just highlight this so we can come back here. I think the takeaway for tonight, at least for me personally, and anybody can comment as what they felt was the most eye-opening part of tonight's section, was to me, who controls the ADL? That, I guess in a sense, it didn't, it's not surprising, but at the same time it was, because I was like, oh, it's British Secret Service. It's not just, a bunch of Luciferian Jews saying, oh, we want to, protect us, and that, we're going to have control over XYZ and we don't want anti-Semitism. No, it's literally out of the British Secret Service. And then to control policy and have it be interconnected with the FBI, which also, remember guys, I just showed you tonight, doesn't have a charter to operate within the United States of America. So, okay, the Spectre, I get that too. Yeah, he said, question is, did Trump break the mold or just a sleight of hand? I can see arguments for both sides. I think what's really going to decide the fuckery of Trump one way or other is what the hell is going on next week, right? With both meetings. That's going to tell me a lot. But, I mean, Trump's already been in their hand for a lot of various different things and just been an absolute shill for the global Luciferians anyway. And yeah, hey, Mac, good point. MI6, Brene Brith, ADL. Yep. And which he didn't even bring up Brene Brith, which is kind of surprising that he'd have all the rest of these connections. Well, who knows? Maybe he's going to bring it up later. I don't know. But that's another definite group that everybody needs to look into. And if you're a VSOF member, yearly member, lifetime member, you have access to the VSOF online library, of which contains all of Bill Cooper's lectures, everything that he ever did. And he has several of them on the foundations of Brene Brith, where they came from, what they are, and so on and so forth. So if you guys want to know who they are and you don't know, I highly suggest going and listening to those first, because he did a great job in explaining it. So, okay. So with that, I think we can say goodnight for the evening. I'd like to thank everyone for showing up. It's good to see all you guys in chat over on Rumble. Flood, Not Nerdy, AMAC, and I think I got everybody. Oh, Kevin's in there too. Nice. Good to see you guys. And of course, everybody at the VSOF who came to enjoy tonight's show on our mega server. All right. So I'll see everybody in the VSOF this coming Wednesday for Open Roundtable, and see the rest of you guys when I see you. And again, if you'd like to join the Vocational Science Freedom, go to vocationalsciencefreedom.org, click on the welcome package, download it, get your comms set up, and join in with us. And so you can share the rest of the information that we share with each other. So until next time, thanks for coming. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And until later, stay safe and definitely stay sovereign.